So it's really nice to have you here, Jill Thompson, in our podcast website, whatever this will be, online. I always have to start by a very broad question, very basic. So who are you? And can you tell us a little bit how you got into comic books?
My name is Jill Thompson. I have been illustrating and writing comics for many decades now.
Only 2 or 3, not that many.
Right, but I've been doing this longer than, it's the majority of my life has been drawing and writing comics. I got my start kind of like most other comic book professionals. I really liked comics growing up. When I was very young, I started to go to comic conventions. I brought my very bad drawings around to show the artists that were at the convention, who were some of my heroes. John Byrne drew, classic X-Men, was my biggest hero at the time. And I was able to be in the same room with him and show him my sketchbook. And I'm trying to figure out if you want this to be a very, very long interview or a very short interview.
It just depends on the time you have.
Okay. So when I was really little, I was the only girl at the comic convention, and my father went to one of them with me because it was just in a very small hotel ballroom. It had 2 guests sitting behind a table, and then the rest was dealers of old comic books. And my father came with me once, which was very nice of him. And I think he expected, well, we did that once. It's out of her system. I won't be doing this again. And I was very excited. And I said, oh, Dad, there's going to be another one in, 2 months. Can we go back? And that's when he just started dropping me off at the front of the hotel, giving me some money for lunch and leaving me there saying, come back at 4:30 outside and I'll pick you up. So there was a time when I was at a convention. John Byrne was there. I was terrifyingly shy. And I stood as there was groups of fans around him getting sketches and having things signed. And he had piles of X-Men pages on the table that he was selling for something like $15 a page. And I had $5. And I wish that I would have used the only advantage I had at the time was that in a room full of 40-year-old men, I was a 13-year-old shy girl who wanted to draw, and they were being very sweet to me, like, oh, let the girl come over. And I wonder if I would have been able to get a page from him. But I spent the whole day watching him draw for people, and I would get close to the table, and then I was very afraid, and I would back up and let other guys go in front of me. And then Terry Austin was also there, the inker, and he watched me do this all day. And finally, I'd been doing it for hours. He called me over and said, you've been standing here all day. Would you like to show John something? And I was like, no. Well, actually, I said yes, but I shook my head no. I just realized I did something that people listening to a podcast wouldn't be able to see. So Terry said, well, you have a sketchbook. Do you want to show John your sketchbook? He goes, why don't you show it to me? So I showed it to him, and he looked through it, and then he nudged John and said, John, this girl's been standing here all day. She's got a sketchbook. I think you should take a look at it. So he took it open, flipped through the pages. He's kind of making a stern expression, like he's studying it very much. I'm standing back, like nervous and scared. And he flips through it, and he slams it closed, slams it on the table, and says, I think we should break her fingers. See, you just did the thing I did.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God.
And I'm not a 13 years old girl.
And he said, Because if she's this good now, think of how good she is going to be when she draws comics. And the key word there is he said when and not if. So it wasn't that I would never get to do this. Even though my drawings were very, very bad, he said when I drew comics. So I don't even remember how I got home that day. I don't remember taking my sketchbook back. I don't remember getting home, but it was like all I could think of was that John Byrne looked at my drawings and one day I'm going to draw comics. So I just kept reading comics and going back to conventions and showing my drawings to other artists that were there. And anyone that gave me advice, of which many people did, they corrected all of my mistakes and told me what was wrong and why it was wrong. And instead of being discouraged, I just thought, oh, okay, well, I need to learn how to draw that. And I need to fix that. And I need to learn how to draw a car and people and pretty much everything. And I would go home and practice. And then I would come back with different pages to the next convention and show them, like, I did my homework. And some of them suggested that I go to art school. So I also did that. And once I got to art school, the advice I was given was take every class you can. Don't focus on comics while you're there. You know about comics. You love comics, obviously. You know how to tell the language of comics. So learn everything they teach you and apply it all to the comic page, which I did, because one thing I like to be was a good student in regular school and in art school. And while I was in art school, I started working for some smaller companies. Actually, even when I was in high school, I was working for some smaller companies. And when you do one thing for one publisher, even if it's very small, you take that comic and you show it to the next person. And that's like your resume, because that means someone else took a chance on you and you know how to meet a deadline and you know how to work with a writer or an editor. And then when you have two comics, then you can show those two comics to someone else. And they're like, oh, these two people have taken a chance on you first. So now I will also take a chance on you. And it kind of worked its way up until suddenly I was working at DC Comics.
You mentioned before that you loved comic books as a medium, so that you wanted to draw comics from quite the beginning. What is the strength of the comic book as a medium of and in terms of storytelling to you? What is really the strength of this medium compared to other like television or?
I feel the strength of the comic book medium is the fact that it is a very interactive form of entertainment, because while the artists and writers do an amazing job of giving you all the information that you need, there's a lot of information that takes place in your imagination as the reader, but you're given those cues from the writer and the artist. You know, the stuff that happens in between the panels, the stuff that the fact that time happens from the page turn, where it can be milliseconds to a reveal of something that happens in one moment, or you can turn a page and decades will pass, or that the way you lay out panels can make time speed up or slow down or connect with you in an emotional way. And you don't have any sound and you don't have any voices from like a film. So that's all stuff that by reading the comics you have evoked in your own head. And the job is to make that happen without literally writing in a caption, "This is the sad part. Now you're going to cry." It's doing everything else to give you this emotion.
And you think that you learned to like draw emotions only by practicing and practicing? Is there some method that you learned maybe during art school or just by reading also other comic books that you learned to put emotions into the drawings?
Well, I illustrate comics to affect me. And when I write something or I write and illustrate something, if I have often cried while I've been working on things like Beast of Burden. I was weeping at one point when I was drawing one of the stories. And so if I have an emotional reaction, I'm hoping that the reader will also have an emotional reaction. And if I'm working with a writer and I read what they write and it moves me, I want to make sure that that type of feeling is passed along to the next person that reads it, because they're not going to be able to read the script that I got, you know, the thing that I got from the writer to work from. So it's my job to interpret that and bring that to the page. And the way that I do that is by storytelling. So it's about the pacing and how I lay out panels and how I manipulate time and on the page. And I'm not sure it's something that it's not something that I was ever taught, because no one sits down and says, this is how you do this thing, because it's not the same every time. It's very much up to interpretation. It's not a formula. It's using things that you know through experience are effective, or isolating a key moment that you know you can focus on. So there's so many aspects that I think about when I'm designing a page, even though I'm given art direction by a writer and I know the dialogue. It's my job then to figure out, how do I make that flow from panel to panel? How do I show the action in one panel that might be completely separate from the action in the next, but make it flow in a way that moves your eye in a certain way. So you're creating a design in the panel and then on the page and then moving up to like a moment or an action or away from that moment and action. And you're setting a scene and you're trying to make sure it happens in a pleasing way. And you have to figure out, if I put word balloons, are they going to interrupt the flow of how I want your eye to go? So there's multiple little like micro elements that I'm always thinking about, but not consciously anymore. Because I'm doing it and it's like, I know when it looks the right way. But when I teach students, I'm telling them, these are the things that you should be focusing on. So it's not just, I want to draw this cool guy. It's, why is he on the page? What does he look like? Does the placement of him in this panel help the reader's eye flow across the tier of panels and then down to the next one? And do you make sure there are no tangents happening there, so it makes sure that the motion moves in the correct way, or you have the correct depth of field? And it's all these elements of design that are happening, you know, in every panel and on every page.
When you started at DC Comics, and can you hear me?
A little bit.
Okay. So when you started at DC Comics and Vertigo, were you like anxious, or did you feel pressure to do comic books for the big publishers that were the already the big two of the industry?
When I started at DC Comics, I think I was both excited and anxious, because I finally was working for a major company. I had worked for a lot of other companies before that. And I feel like I had really worked hard and I was ready to make the move to some place where I would, I guess, gain more eyes on my work. So I think I wasn't nervous as much as I was trying to hang with the big boys, I guess.
And that was maybe a question also, because it was and it still is in some ways a very masculine environment. So maybe it's hard also to just to get noticed.
So I wanted to be good, and I knew what I was drawing in pencil. You know, it's like I was working with one of my idols, George Perez, on the very first thing I worked on DC Comics. So that's like a high bar to have. So it's like I wanted to be able to, I guess, like
be worthy of the legend. Maybe,
yeah, worthy of the legend, but also like be the best student of him as a teacher. So if he gave me a script that was something that he was writing mostly for himself, like sometimes there were 19 panels on a page. That's pretty daunting for in any situation, but as your first job. But that's easy for him. He's writing what he sees in his head and what's easy for him to draw. It might not be what everyone else draws. And I wanted to make sure I was up to the challenge. And I wanted, when he saw it, to like it. And I wanted him to say, oh, good, this is what I wanted here. So I wanted to be worthy of working with him. And I was nervous about that. But then once you start working there, then it becomes about so many other things other than just being able to work with, someone you admire.
At what point did you make your first creator-owned comics?
You mean professionally?
Yeah.
I made my first creator-owned comics professionally around 1996. I had been working at Vertigo for a long time, and at the time, there were all of the situations where everyone was kind of jumping from title to title as creative teams, where there would be a writer and they would want to work with you for a story arc because you could. And I think Neil Gaiman had set a precedent that this is something that could be done, because Sandman was written in arcs, and then he would have different artists for different stories, and other writers decided, that's a cool idea, let's do that too. And artists kind of liked that because you would get to work on a lot of different titles. You wouldn't become stuck on something that maybe you started to like and then didn't like so much after doing it for 12 issues. But then in the middle of that, there was a boom in comics, and then there was a bust where there were lots and lots of titles all the time, and they were selling millions of copies. So it was easy to jump from one thing to another. And then when suddenly a lot of these titles imploded, any artist that had been offered a contract but were like, oh, no, I can't take it because, I got this other arc coming up. When suddenly they saw that maybe all these companies were folding, they said, oh, hey, you remember that exclusive you offered me? I think I'm going to take it. So I was still busy leapfrogging from one project to the next, not noticing that maybe there wasn't another lily pad to jump to. And one day, I was waiting for the, other editor or something who had said they wanted to work with me. And I would call someone and they're like, oh, no, we filled that up. So-and-so signed a contract. So, we're not going to take any more story arcs. And that happened in several places. And suddenly I found myself without a job. And then I had time to myself. And it just so happened that my first niece was being born, and I wanted to make a gift for the baby. And I also wanted to be her godmother. And at the time, I did not realize that being a godmother was a religious title bestowed upon you. I thought it meant, if something happens to the parents, you get the baby to take care of her. And I thought, I would do good at that. But then when I found out that it was a church thing, I thought about myself at the time. I was much more goth than I am now, obviously. I had my big crazy red hair. I was wearing a black motorcycle jacket, a lot of black. And I thought of myself standing in the back of a Catholic church, and I said, oh, I'd be a pretty scary godmother. And when I said those two words, I immediately had this little witch fairy image pop into my head. But she was tiny, like Tinkerbell sized. And then I quickly sketched her out. And I thought, oh, whoa, that's interesting. Oh, I'll make a gift for the baby. I'll make a book for her. And it'll be about her scary godmother. Oh, cool. And then I said, well, who is her scary godmother? And I just kept asking myself questions about that character's name. And I kept coming up with characters, and I came up with a story. And suddenly I realized, whoa, I actually have a whole book. I have a story. Let me write it down. Let me start making something. And then I thought I was actually going to just, take a bunch of watercolor paper, hand letter a book, make illustrations like a children's book, sew it together, bind it, and give it as a gift to the baby. And I looked at it and went, oh my God, wait a minute. I have my own characters. Oh, I should make a book for the baby. Like, I should try and get this published. Everyone else has been saying you should do something of your own, but I didn't ever have anything before. This is the thing. And then I started shopping it around to find a publisher. And that's how I started my own creator thing.
You are still doing hand painted pages today.
Oh, all of my pages are hand drawn and still, painted. Yeah.
You never switched to digital painting.
No, I have an iPad. I have Procreate. I mess around with it a little bit, but it doesn't seem natural to me. Not that the pencil doesn't feel natural. Just what I accomplish with like the turn of my wrist or a slight movement of my fingers, I have to choose a brush. Then I have to go and adjust settings with names. I don't understand what they are supposed to do. And not every time I turn the pencil that way, that action is supposed to happen. So they added a lot of steps to what is just a natural slight movement for me. So it's like they added a lot of math to my art, and I don't have a good math brain. So it's hard for me to grasp. And I try and watch tutorials about how to do it, but I don't learn well that way either, because oftentimes what I think the video is about isn't the thing I need to know. It starts out a little bit like that, and then it goes to something else. Or sometimes they think you already know a lot about the entire app and all of the settings to tell you what's happening in it. And I'm like, oh, I don't know the stuff you're talking about. Now I have to go watch some other videos to find out what those things meant. And then I realize I've wasted so much of my day and I haven't drawn anything yet. And then I panic, and then I put the thing down and I say, I guess I can't learn you now. And then I go back to drawing. So I really need to hire a tutor to just help me learn, what do all these things mean and what do they do? And then I'll take notes like when I was in school, because the way I learn is I have to listen, ask questions, write down notes, actively do the thing. I would like to add that to my list of skills, but it's not one that I have yet.
I had a question about the graphic novel Wonder Woman: The True Amazon.
Yes.
Because you started at DC on Wonder Woman with George Perez, and so 2 decades later, you're drawing and writing your own graphic novel about Wonder Woman. Can you tell us a little bit about the origin of this project?
The reason that I ended up doing the graphic novel Wonder Woman: The True Amazon is because, to be honest, when I was little and growing up, I watched Wonder Woman on television. I read a couple comics here or there, but I didn't enjoy Wonder Woman the way I enjoyed things like Spider-Man or X-Men. I felt she was always too perfect for me. And I knew I wasn't perfect. I felt more like Peter Parker than I definitely did Wonder Woman. And also there was a lot of mythology in her origin, but it didn't seem like there was much mythology, like Greek mythology, in her story. And at the time, I also really loved all types of mythology, Greek mythology, Norse mythology, fairy tales, which I still love all of these things. And I thought it would be great if there was more of that in there. So while I didn't dislike her, I just preferred other types of superheroes. I mean, my first like big superhero passion was Chris Claremont, John Byrne X-Men. And the very first issue that I saw was the Run for Your Life Kitty Pryde. It was in the middle of the Hellfire Club saga, which I had not read any X-Men up until then. I just found this in like on a rack. Really loved it. But that had Phoenix in it. And I looked like Kitty Pryde at the time. I was a 13-year-old girl who lived outside of Chicago. I wanted to be her. Storm was in it. Phoenix and the White Queen have a huge telekinetic fight at the end of it. I was like, that's the superhero I would like to be. So when I ended up working on George's Wonder Woman, I really loved it. I loved the fact that he brought all of this mythology back into it. I liked his portrayal of her. It made me like get reintroduced to the character in a way that I totally appreciated it. But still, in the back of my head, I thought she's so perfect. And I was like, what would happen? You know, that wouldn't happen if you grew up on an island of doting aunties and grandmas. You were the only kid there. Plus, you were royal. You know, you're royalty. You know, you would get spoiled. It would be like one of those old fairy tales, The Prince and the Pauper, or something where it's like there's this haughty prince that has to learn a lesson. And the only way he can learn is from the peasant girl or the peasant boy, because they have a different life and which he's never experienced. And I was like, that's the story I would like to tell. So I just kind of started writing out what I would write. And at first it was called The Very Selfish Princess. And I wanted, and I pitched it all over the place at DC. And I said, I know this isn't in continuity, and it will eventually, she will get to the exact place where we know her, where she'll be the type of Wonder Woman that everyone expects. I said, but I want to tell this type of more Elseworlds type story. And it got kind of, you know, people listen, they're like, oh, that's kind of cool, but we don't want to change her origin. I was like, well, you wouldn't change the origin. It would just be the same way you do Elseworlds with Batman, where he's a cowboy or a knight or something like that. And then one time I was at a convention and I ran into Jim Lee in the bar, and we were both waiting for other people to go to dinner. And I said, Jim, I have this idea that I've been pitching all over the place. Can I throw it at you right now? And he said, sure, what is it? And I told him, he goes, oh, I like that. I really like that. He goes, let me see what I can do. And I was like, okay. And then I never heard back from him for like 6 months. And I thought, oh, well, I guess, you know, it's going to go nowhere. I really liked it. I wish that I could have done it. And then suddenly, out of the blue, he texts me and says, hey, sorry it took me so long to get back to you. I was just trying to figure out where would be a good place to put this. So so-and-so is going to, I forget which other, so-and-so is going to contact you. We're going to start something, you know, it's like, tell me how many issues you want it to be, or what it would be like. And we'll get it going. And then suddenly it happened. And I'll be forever grateful to him for letting me tell this story.
Do you think that maybe it might be related to the fact, I think if I recall that the first movie was out, so they had also to do projects to I don't have the English word, to accompany.
Accompany?
Yeah, accompany.
Well, I had finished this well before the movie came out, and then they just sat on it, and it was supposed to come out, and then when they knew the movie was going to come out, plus it was like the 75th anniversary of Wonder Woman as well.
So
they had certain projects, and they decided, okay, this one should come out on this date. This one should come out with the anniversary. This one should come out with the movie. And mine, I think, was scheduled to come out with the like on the date of the anniversary.
Yeah.
But I had it done I would say 6 or more, 7 months before the movie was finished. So
it's quite frustrating to have your projects sitting just finished and not published.
It's happened more than once.
Yeah, it's something common in the
it's
industry.
Sometimes about scheduling. You'll have, or sometimes, maybe an artist will take a very long time to get something done. So when they thought it was supposed to be scheduled, it didn't hit that date. So then they'll figure out, based on other things that they have, when's a good time to put it out.
You've done also an issue of Wonder Woman like 2 years ago. It was issue 776 or something like that. It was just one issue.
The one with Becky Cloonan.
Yeah. But it's like the only work that we've seen from you in the mainstream industry. So you don't want to do more work for hire.
I do lots of work for hire. I'm slower than I used to be. I've been focusing on a lot of personal things, but I can't keep up with the schedule at this point of a monthly comic, especially with people using digital to do monthly comics. They're able to throw backgrounds in that they save and adjust stuff. And I'm still working traditionally. So when I work on things, it's a little story here, it's a little story there, where they know they have a lot of like anthologies a lot of times, where they have a lot of people working on things. And while I'm working on my story, it's not that I'm, dreadfully slow, but in comparison
I wasn't implying this.
Oh, no, I'm saying this just to clarify to the audience that in comparison to people who can fill in a background and not be worried about the humidity in the air affecting how it dries or whether or not you can work into it yet, it's best if I work on things that are outside continuity. And I like things. I want the work that I do to be timeless. I don't want it to be, set to a certain time period or a certain, that's when they had this costume, or it be a gimmick. I want it to just be a very good story that people really love.
Okay. Do we have still have a little bit of time to speak about Beasts of Burden?
Yes.
So again, the same question: if you can dive into the origins of this project that you did with Evan Dorkin.
Well, it's not a very exciting origin. Evan was the person who created that. Evan was the person who had an idea for this type of thing. There were a series of anthologies that Dark Horse was putting out called Dark Horse Book of Hauntings was the very first one. So it was an anthology. It was all stories about ghosts. And the editor at the time, which was Scott Alley, asked Evan to contribute to this anthology. And he had this idea about a haunted doghouse. And he's pitched it to Scott, and Scott said, "Great, do it." And he was like, "I can't draw dogs. No way, man." Which of course is ridiculous because Evan can draw anything. I think he was just thinking his style was not the tone he wanted to set for this. So, and I think he could still do it. I don't think he was giving himself the credit he's due. So then he suggested to Scott, "Hey, maybe Jill could do it." So Scott just called me on the phone. He was like, "Hey, you want to do this story with Evan Dorkin?" And of course I wanted to work with Evan because I love his work. And that was the very complicated story of how we started doing it. But I guess once that volume came out, it was very popular. They got a lot of excellent feedback about it. And some people said it made us cry. People in the office said, "This made me cry." So when the next anthology came out, they asked him to do another one. So then it turned out we would do a story with those dogs in each of the volumes. So it was the Book of Haunting, the Book of Witchcraft, the Book of Monsters, and then the Book of the Dead. And because they asked him for more than one, he had created a whole backstory for all of these animals and why their neighborhood was haunted and what happened there and what would happen there in the future, and like the whole Wise Dog Society that they would eventually find out that they could be a part of, and what they did, and how humans don't play a very big part in what's going on. Things that he still knows that probably have never been talked about in any of the stories. So, once those 4 were over, Dark Horse asked, could we do a series of this? Would you like to do a series? And we just started doing issues of it after that.
And was it hard to draw the dogs and cats? And did you have references? Do you have dogs and cats to help you?
I have 2 cats. At the time I was working on the very first Beasts of Burden, I had different cat. He's since passed away. I love dogs. I just have never owned one. I mean, I've never had a dog companion because technically I don't think you own dogs. You're allowed to take care of them. You're given the gift of a dog or a cat. But I love them. And there are dogs in the neighborhood now that I see and I call, oh, hi, Jack, or hi, Ace, because they're the variety of dog. And then my cat, I have 2 cats, but I do have an orange cat who didn't exist at the time I was working on this book, but did have a neighborhood cat who my neighbors across the street let outside, and he would roam around and sometimes end up on my porch or in my backyard, and he is the orphan. So.
And what was it? Was it hard for you? Was it a challenge? Because I've known from other interviews that some artists find it really difficult to draw animals in general, and especially that you have to draw them at each panel and doing stuff and see the movements and take care of their
paws, their
feet.
The
paws and go on.
I didn't find it difficult to draw the animals in Beasts of Burden. I guess mostly because I feel like my style is realistic / cartoony. It's cartooning. I made myself watch Lady and the Tramp a bunch of times. I cried every single time I watched it. If I talk about the part that makes me cry, it makes me cry. Because I was like, I want to see how Disney animators, animated the dogs, because they had awesome expressions, but they still moved around and acted like dogs. And I didn't think it was very difficult to give them a bit more expression than they have. Dogs naturally smile and make expressions. If you come home and your dog has chewed up a pillow that's on the couch and there's particles everywhere and fluff and stuff like that, and then you come in and you go, oh, who chewed up that pillow? The dog will give you like the look in his eyebrow. The dog has eyebrows and his eyebrows will move all over the place. Dog, and it's guilty. It's a guilty face. So it wasn't that tough to make them actually look like that. And cats, I love cats. So.
Okay.
And I had a cat named Holstein, and he could look pissed off at you. He could furrow a brow like a dog, and he would look at you and give you the side eye. So I was like, it's not going to be too tough.
And I heard you mentioning before at the table at the convention that you don't have or you don't have the rights to continue Beasts of Burden from Dark Horse, or is there something that obstructs you to do more?
I believe Evan can do more. I guess I also have rights, but they're not publishing it right now, and I don't know why. Like this, all of the things, the business things go to Evan. I didn't come up with the idea, so I don't take control of that type of thing. All the stories are his stories, and his wife's, and so I don't know. And I mean, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna call. When I get back, I figure I'm not going to do it while I'm traveling, but I'm going to say, hey, everyone keeps asking. I didn't know Beast of Burden was out of print. Is it out of print in the United States as well, or just foreign editions because no one can find it? I know they let Scary Godmother go out of print. And so now I guess I need to find a new publisher for that.
That was my last question. That was what holds the future for you?
Well, I would like to do more Scary Godmother. I've had a very hard year. So all of the plans that I had that were supposed to be finished by now, life threw terrible obstacles in my way to get anything done. So those plans are just moved back until next year. So I'm planning on doing a completely new Scary Godmother book. I have some ideas for a couple of different stories, but not of something completely different, something unlike I've done before that I want to start. It's just that it's hard to do all of the jobs on more than one thing and you know, continue to do everything else that I need to do in my life. So I just have to focus, get one done, focus, and get the next one done.
Okay, so I guess you're going to be busy.
I plan on being busy. I don't like to not be busy. I don't know how to relax. I realized being a freelance artist, I have a lot of freedom, which I really enjoy. I love to be able to travel like this, to come to conventions, to go on and travel around and do things that people who have a regular job are not necessarily able to do unless it's vacation. But I also realize I don't ever have vacation because I don't know how. I always feel like, oh, well, who's filling the orders of the Scary Godmother dolls right now? Well, no one until I get back home. So for 2 weeks, they've been waiting. And when I get back home, I have to do it. And then who's doing this house project that needs to be finished at my house? Well, I'm the person that has to do it. So I juggle all of those things plus my art.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to your next projects.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I know that I won't get the answer until after you transcribe this. What are something that you would like to see from me?
What I would like to see from you?
Like what type of thing?
An original graphic novel in the form of like a mystery story infused with horror. I think
that's hilarious great. Because that's the thing I said. That's something that's not like anything I've done before. That's what I'm going to be doing.
Well, you've got a buyer already.
Okay.
That's right. That's a perfect way to finish our record. Thank you very much, Jill.
You're welcome.